say danger. We're talking about dangerous prayers here at Church Alive. Now, this is a pretty deep teaching this morning. I'm going to try to get into all of this. There'll be aspects of it that I won't be able to get down the stream on too far. But we're talking about revolutionizing our prayers, and especially when we're praying for ourselves. And we're really making ourselves available and transparent to God and to the power of His Spirit and the authority of heaven in our life. We looked at a few weeks ago the prayer, Search Me. Today I want to talk about Know Me. Everybody say, Know Me. Let me give you this thought. I believe that God's desire is that each of us would walk in covenant relationship with Him. Everybody say covenant. There's a real confusion in our culture today about what a covenant relationship is and what a contractual relationship is. They are not one and the same. A contract is something that is exchanged between one person and another person, or a group of people and another group of people. A covenant is a commitment that you make, and it's not really binding necessarily by your signature. How many of you have ever bought a house before? Let me see your hand. How many of you have ever bought a car before? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. You go in, you spend half a day or a whole day in there at a car dealership when all you want to do is buy a car, but at the end of the day, you got to sign all this paperwork, and it's your signature, page after page after page after page, and they'll gladly sell you that car. And you'll call it your car, but it's really not your car yet. It's still owned by the bank, and you're paying the bank off for that car. But you enter into a contract based on your credit score. You want your credit score to be really, really high. That way you get the best interest rate that you can on the planet. Because let me give you a secret in case you didn't know, but all of you know this. Low interest rates are great when it comes to financing. Everybody say low. So you go into a contract and you exchange a down payment and your signature on that document or those documents, and that contract is then binding by the pen and the signature that you put on that piece of paper. If you don't hold up to your end of the bargain, somebody's going to come and take the car or the house away from you, all right? So that's what happens in a contract. A covenant is very different than a contract. A contract is binding by your signature on a piece of paper. A covenant is binding by your heart. It's one heart to another heart. Everybody say heart. Whenever I've done weddings in the past, and I've done many weddings in my lifetime, and the bride and the groom are staying together, the groom does not reach in his back pocket and pull out a piece of paper and let the bride know that you need to agree to this, and I want your signature here, and then we can get married. You do not get married under contractual circumstances. Now, I know you're saying, well, you have to sign a marriage license. Yes. Let me tell you what a marriage license is. It's the state's way of getting more money out of you. Let me just make it plain. That has not always been the case. You do not always have to have a marriage license. When you got married, it was in the witness of those that were around, and you made that covenant. And that's what a covenant is. A covenant is heart to heart. And so in that ceremony, there would be vows exchanged between the bride and the groom in sickness and in health till death do us part. I covenant or I commit my life to you. And we begin this incredible journey. And it is an incredible journey because you're not perfect before the covenant. You're not perfect at the covenant. And you're not perfect after the covenant. It is a work in progress. But that covenant is binding from heart to heart. It is not binding in the sense of a contract. Can I tell you today that we are not in a contractual agreement with Jesus? There's not a person in this room that Jesus has asked you to sign a contract that you will follow Him and that you'll do this and that you'll do this and you'll do this and you'll do this. No, we're in a covenant relationship with God, made possible in the new covenant for you and I to be connected with God through Jesus Christ, the blood, the death, the resurrection, the life, the death, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And then, therefore, our hearts are in this journey. Everybody say heart. Our heart is connected at that level. And so that's where I want to go today when I'm talking about the dangerous prayer of know me. God, I want you to know me, and I want to know you. It's really about a covenant, and it's really necessary to understand what it means to be in a covenant relationship with God. And let me say this, you and I do not initiate the covenant relationship with God. Can I tell you that? I don't want to bust your bubble because we're so independent here and independent thinkers, and we've done great things in our life, but we don't have the ability to initiate that covenant relationship with the Lord. God initiates that covenant relationship with us, and there's aspects about the covenant that I think we need to grasp today to understand why being a part of church and being a part of the kingdom of God is more than just coming and attending a church or being involved a time or two throughout the year. It's really about the heart, and God's desire is that our heart would be so fascinated and so in love and so drawn to Him that we would enter into that covenant relationship with Him and understand what it means to be in covenant relationship with the Lord. Exodus, really quick, chapter 6, verse 5. Again, I'm going to try to stream through this as quick as I can today, so you'll have to listen quick and take some notes. Therefore, say to the Israelites, I am the Lord. Everybody say, I am the Lord. Now, this harkens back to the name of God, Yahweh, Jehovah, the most high and holy name for God in the Old Testament. God refers to Himself as I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. So God is saying what's going to come is a bunch of plagues to change the heart of Pharaoh, and then you're going to know I'm God. I will take you as my own people. There is this moment of covenant here. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. Let me say, I'm going to pause here for a second and say this about following God. How do you know that God is faithful in your life? Just think about that for a second. How do you have proof that God is honoring and faithful to what He says He's going to do in your life? The only way that you are going to know is when you get to the other side of whatever it is you're walking through. Are y'all with me, church? This is why it's called faith in embracing God, that He's true to His word. The only way that the Israelites are going to know that God has been faithful to them in getting them out of Egypt is when they get to the other side. There's no way to know it in the beginning of that process, but each part of the journey that you go through and each moment that you encounter victory and breakthrough in your life, you need to log that in your memory, put it in your journal, write it down somewhere, so when you go through the next part of your journey and the struggle or the difficulty or the chaos or the darkness or the things that you have to navigate, you will remember God has been faithful to me. Everybody say faithful. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. So really quick today, I want to give you 3 words, and we'll break this down as quick as I can about what it means to be in covenant with God. God, I want to know you, and I want you to know me. The heart has to be connected to this. The first one is promise. Everybody say promise. Say it with me again, promise. How many of you have ever made a promise and you broke it before? Let me see your hand. The rest of you tell an untruth because you know you have. We are promise breakers. I remember one time when I was a little kid, I went to VBS, and I promised the Lord that I would read the Bible every day of my life. For 13 days in a row, I read it. On the 14th day, I did not read it, and I felt like I was going to hell because I had broken a promise to the Lord. Let me say this about promises. My grandma used to tell me, don't make promises you won't be able to keep them. Be careful about promises that you make in your life. This is why it's important that you understand in the covenant relationship with God, God is always faithful in His promises to us. Even when we are not faithful in our promises to Him, you can bank on this, you can write it down, you can know this is the truth. God will always be truthful with his promises to us. Now, if you were to walk into or participate in a Jewish Seder today, how many of you have ever participated in a Seder before? Let me see your hand, all right? You would come in, and at some point there would be 5 cups of wine or 5 goblets of wine, and the host would come in, and as you walk through the Seder, and you would begin to take a drink from the cups that were there for you to drink from. The first cup that you would drink from would be a cup to honor God that he has brought you out. Everybody say, brought out. The second cup, the host would encourage you to drink from. This cup would be the cup that you would honor God that he has delivered you from bondage. Everybody say bondage. The third cup is the cup that you would drink, and it's a powerful moment here. When you drink this cup, it's in honor that God has redeemed you. Everybody say redeem. And then the fourth cup that you would drink from in the Seder would be the cup that God has taken you as his own people. Everybody say people. So I want to tell you today, in that mindset and that train of thinking, covenant is about promise, and God makes a promise. And here's the promise. Are you ready for this? We are no longer slaves. Church, are you with me today? We are no longer in bondage. We have been redeemed, and we have been brought out by the mighty hand of God. And make no mistake about it. You and I were not there when the Israelites were brought out of Egypt and freed, but I'm telling you, we've had our own darkness and our own wilderness that we had to be brought out of. And when you walk in covenant relationship with God, the promises of God are this, that you do not have to live your life as a slave or in bondage again. For when you are free indeed. Can I get somebody to say amen in the house? And to live any other way, to live your life as less than free, cheapens the word and the power and the authority of all that God has spoken and done in your life. So the promise is you don't have to be in bondage anymore. The promise is you don't have to be a slave any longer. The promise is that you can walk in freedom. Everybody say freedom. The key is this moment in verse 6 where it says, you are my people. I am your God. Therefore, the promise is you will no longer have to walk this way. The idea carries with it a royal priesthood and a holy people. Everybody say royal. You are royalty today. I know you're not the king or queen of England or the king and queen of anywhere else, but you are royalty. God considers you to be royalty today, a royal priesthood and a holy people. The second one that carries, the second word that in covenant that carries is the word protection. Everybody say protection. Now, how many of you have children? Well, let me ask you this. How many of you would say to your little 4 or 5-year-old Johnny or Sally Sue, today is your day. At 6 a.m., I want you to leave the house. I want you to go play in the road. I want you to pick up snakes. I want you to swing them. I want you to go fall in the creek. I want you to go swim in the lake. I only want you to check back with me one time today. This is your day. Do whatever you want to do. Don't bother me. Don't get up in my grill. You just do whatever it is you want to do. How many of you would ever raise your child that way? Probably not many in the room. Why? Because as a parent, we create boundaries of protection around our children. Now, some people's boundaries are really small, and some people's boundaries are really wide. But as our children get older, those boundaries have to widen until eventually you don't set the boundaries any longer in the lives of your children. When they're adults, they have the boundaries, and they'll begin to set the boundaries for their own children. The boundaries are not set. Now, listen to me, kids in the house. Because I know that you don't like your parents right now, but you will love them. You do love them, and you will like them one day. When they set boundaries in your life, it's really not about controlling you. It's about protecting you from unnecessary pain in your life. Everybody say unnecessary. There's a whole lot of grown people, on this planet, adults that carry around unnecessary pain in their life because just like children push the boundaries, God also creates boundaries for us to live within, not to control our lives, but in order for us to not carry around unnecessary pain in our lives. And what happens when we carry around unnecessary pain or we get outside the boundary that God has established for our lives, then all of a sudden we get mad at God, get mad at the church, get mad at grandma, get mad at our mom, get mad at anybody that's a believer. It's God's fault. God shouldn't have done this. God didn't do this the right way. When really what we've done is we removed ourselves from the protection boundary that God has established for our lives. Are y'all with me, church? Exodus chapter 20, verse 1. There's two parts of protection. I don't have time to get into all this. The first one is salvation. Everybody say salvation. Salvation is good for you, trust me. The second one is preemptive. God already knows, even when He establishes the covenant, that the heart of mankind will not always want to follow hard after God. That there will be other things and other substances, and we'll introduce things to our lives and then introduce things to our bodies. And we'll get addicted or we'll have pain in our life because we push the boundary or we get outside the boundary that God has established. God already knows that we're going to do that. And so He says, here's the deal. I've saved you. I have brought you out. You've been brought out today. At some point in your life, you were brought out, you were redeemed, and you are no longer a slave. Now, here's the boundary. This is what the Lord says. This is how I want you to live. We call it the Ten Commandments. Exodus chapter 20, verse 1 through 17. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven, above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. This is why it shouldn't be a struggle for believers to worship Jesus. Should not be a struggle for a follower of Christ to worship the Lord. It should not be strange. It should not be weird. It should not be crazy. It should be a part of who we are. Lord, I worship. We worship in other avenues, in other ways. He said, you should not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. God makes it plain. I'm jealous. I'm jealous of you. Punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses His name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Let me back up and tell you that my children know that they will never refer to me as their old man. Number one, I'm not old. Number two, I am a man, but I am not their old man. I am their dad, and I have a name. My name is Robert G. Lee. The G is for the G is for Glenn. I also shouldn't refer to God by any other name but His name. He is God. He is my Father. He does not have a last name. I remember the story I read about this little boy whose coach was cussing like a sailor. And you may struggle with cussing in the house. And he referred to God and he said, I didn't know God had a last name. Now you go figure this one out. And the coach quit cussing thereafter. Because God doesn't have a last name. His name is Yahweh. Are y'all with me, church? He says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, your animals. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but He rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and mother. Listen to this one. So that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or anything that belongs to your neighbor. And you say, oh, Pastor, that's Old Testament. Well, let me tell you about Jesus. Everybody say Jesus. Jesus is the fulfillment of the law. In the Old Testament, you did this in order to save your life. In the New Testament, Jesus fills you and lives in your life and brings salvation to you and changes your heart. Everybody say heart. In other words, we live in such an age where there's no consequences to things that people do. People feel like they can do whatever they want to do and get away with it, and they're entitled to it. Well, that's not how God established the order. And He said, here's the boundary, and I want you to live within this boundary. And get this. Are y'all ready for this? And it's going to be so wild that you're actually going to want to do this. Because your heart is going to be so inclined and so connected to God in such a way that you won't view the boundary as a controlling thing. You'll view the boundary as the place that God has provided for you to do life and to be blessed. Everybody say blessed. Now, I know that you're not one of these kids, but I was the kid that was always pushing the boundary. Oh, I hated boundaries. And I pushed them, and I was my teacher's worst nightmare. And I finally grew up, and now I have a son that pushes the boundaries. Hallelujah. Y'all know what I'm talking about? God still loves you if you push the boundaries. But I got to tell you, He creates those to protect us from unnecessary pain in our lives. Relationships get yucky. Sin is yucky. It is not glorious. It is not beautiful. It is not celebrated. It is destructive. It destroys our lives. It brings upon us pain that God never intended for us to carry in our lives. And there's so many people on this planet, and there's many in this room today, that you are carrying pain in your life, and it's not necessary. It is unnecessary pain in your life. There's some pain that's going to come to you that you cannot control. You're going to lose a father. You're going to lose a mother. Somebody's going to violate you potentially in your life. Some of you are sitting in this room and you've been violated at the hands or the activity of someone else. You did not bring that pain to your life. And I understand there's that pain, and then there's pain that you introduced to your life. And all of a sudden, one day you wake up and you're addicted to a substance, or you're addicted to something in your life, and you are not the person that you used to be, because this stuff changes you, and it brings about such a heaviness and such a darkness in your life, and you are no longer in love with the Creator of the universe, but you are driven to find something in your life to dull the pain, and often it's the unnecessary pain that we have. You don't have to live this way. I have good news for you. Everybody say good news. You don't have to live this way. God says, here's the deal: salvation and preemptive protection. The third thing is this. I got to hurry. There's the promise, the protection, and then there's the presence. Everybody say presence. We sang about it a while ago. We're going to sing about it again in a minute. Shekinah glory. Here we are, standing in your presence. The rabbis gave the word Shekinah to describe the presence of God. This word is not found in the Hebrew text. You won't find the word Shekinah in the Hebrew text. It's a word, it's a Hebrew word that the rabbis would use to declare the presence of God is here. The presence of the Lord is here. Now, I got to tell you, there was a moment in Exodus chapter 33 that Moses is having a conversation with God at the tent of meeting. It's a place he would converse with God often. And the Bible says that the Lord would come in a pillar, and that would be significant of a cloud, if you will, of the presence of God. And the rabbis would describe that as Shekinah. And Moses says to God, who's going to go with me? You want me to do this? And you want me to declare this? Who's going with me? Now, I got to tell you, God's answer is profound. He is not sending a surrogate to go with Moses. Here's what God says in Exodus 33:14. The Lord replied, my presence will go with you. Would you say that with me? My presence will go with you. And so here's a part of covenant that can really get lost because we fall in love with religion way too much and we dismiss the presence of God in our lives. But I got to tell you today, just as it's true of Moses in Exodus 33:14, when Moses says, how am I going to do this? How is this going to be possible? How am I going to be able to carry out what you're asking me to carry out? And the Lord would say, my presence is going to go with you. I want you to know today that I believe the presence of God goes with us. And when the presence of the Lord is with you, there is no mountain too high and there is no valley too low. There is no too difficult of a situation and there is no too much darkness that you cannot overcome. There is no dream in your life that is impossible when the presence of the Lord goes with you. To God be the glory. My presence will be with you. This is why when I'm raising my children, I said, son, I'll be with you. I try not to make promises that I will break, but there's going to come a day where I will not be with you, but the presence of the Lord will be with you, and I'll always be a phone call away from where you are. Jesus picked this up in the New Testament when the disciples were all afraid and nervous that Jesus is going away. And he used language like this: I will never leave you nor forsake you. How many of you know today that Jesus will never leave nor forsake you? Now, we'll get outside the boundary and forsake him, but Jesus is not going to forsake us. He also used language like this: I will pray and ask the Father to send you a comforter, and he will live with you and in you. Now, to diminish the presence of God, I don't even know how you can do that. Theologically, I don't even know how people consistently try to throw away the impact and the power of the presence of God in our lives. Think about that for a second. If we don't have the presence of God, this is very robotic. Hello? And we know we live a very unpredictable life. But with the presence of God in our lives, and we go from one part of the journey to the next part of the journey, the one leg to the next leg, I'm telling you right now, with the presence of God, all things are possible. With the presence of God, there is nothing that you cannot overcome, and there is nothing that you cannot navigate in your life. Now, I like to think I have a pretty good presence, but I can only go with you so far. In the human realm, people will only go with you so far. You let things get tough. You know that Dr. Tim Keller did a study recently about friendships in America. This is really what covenant is. It's a friendship. This is why the New Testament would say, greater love has no one than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Dr. Tim Keller did a study that friendships in the Western world are now down to this: what do I get out of the friendship, and at what is the least cost of this friendship? It used to be, what can I give to this friendship? What do I have that I can bring to this friendship? And this is why it's easy for people to get in and out of friendships now. Friend here today, no friend tomorrow. Friend for 3 weeks, no friend. Because we exhaust. Can I just tell you that friendships are exhausting? Yes. Hello. They're not nice and pretty and all wrapped up in bows like they are at the very beginning, and then all of a sudden you find out all the dirt and all the mess and you go, woo, this is way more than I bargained for. It's messy. Can I tell you that God knows that you're going to be messy? God knows that you're full of mess. God knows that you have the propensity to get outside of his boundary, and he still would say to you, I want you to come into covenant relationship with me. I promise you that you no longer have to be a slave. I will protect you, and my presence will go with you wherever you go.